of course. Keep those questions on the live Q&A coming in. Although I should warn you, actually, this session, this panel session, we're probably not going to get time for Q&A, but I can still read your comments, and it's a lovely way to get your feedback. Okay, well, the job market is allegedly sweet and generous at the moment, but not for MCs like me, because I'm about to be turfed off screen and have my lunch cut by a couple of new presenters. They are part of PICAC. You heard about them. They're not OPEC, they are partners in culturally appropriate care. And a couple of members of PICAC, or leading members of PICAC, are about to take over, and we're going to look at some new and emerging communities. We've got a couple of panelists. Lisa Trabuzio joins us. She's a manager with the Centre for Cultural Diversity in Aged Care. And also Nikki Rittenhausen, who is the Senior Advisor and Project Officer with the Centre for Cultural Diversity in Aged Care. They both have their own stories to tell, which take them around the world. I know Lisa's undertaking cross-cultural research in Egypt, and you have an unusual mix of academic qualifications too in psychology, social work, a master's in Islamic studies, and a graduate diploma in creative arts therapy. I wonder what you have to think about what Norman said about wellness. And Nikki Rittenhausen, I know he's worked at the Ethnic Community Councils of Victoria. He's overseen their publication of Golden Years, and I know his background takes us to Germany and Brazil. You're all multilingual, all multicultural, and you're all very welcome to put me out of a job for the next half hour or so between here and lunch. So, Lisa and Nikki, over to you.
Thank you so much, Brett, for that very, very positive introduction to myself and Nikki, of course, from the Centre for Cultural Diversity in Ageing, and of course, our partners in culturally appropriate care, Victorian providers. So we're really grateful to be here today to host this amazing session around new and emerging communities and what are the needs of new and emerging communities. So it's just with great honour and privilege that we're able to co-design this presentation with community leaders who work tirelessly every day to advocate for the needs of their communities and to sort of have a voice within the wider multicultural and aged care health and aged care sector. So before we go on to introduce these community leaders and advocates, I'd like to first give a definition of what new and emerging may be. So over to Nikki now.
Thanks very much, Brett and Lisa. I just want to sort of give a high-level overview of new and emerging communities in aged care. And we consider multicultural communities have emerging aged care needs that experience a significant increase in their aged population, have settled in Australia more recently compared to more established migrant communities, and lack community infrastructure and ethno-specific services. And this is sort of a fluid definition, and I hand back to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Nikki. So I guess it's we're looking at communities that perhaps have just entering the aged care system, that might be sort of more recently arrived in Australia, that might not have the social connection or sort of the service system to sort of that have culturally inclusive care as much as perhaps the more established communities of, say, post-World War II migration, for example, or even further back. So just to give you a bit of an overview of that's what we're talking about today. And now we're going to introduce the speakers. So we've got Sue Advani, who's the president of SIVA International, a unique non-religious, non-political, non-profit organisation focusing on the rapidly expanding Australian South Asian community in Sydney. Welcome, Sue. We've got Marlon De Leon, who's the president of the Filipino Community Council of Victoria, working, of course, very hard on the needs of the Filipino community, the diverse Filipino community in Victoria. And we've got Luis Sanchez, who's the president of the Latin American Community of Australia. So welcome to Sue, Marlon and Luis into this panel discussion. And all of you have obviously things in common, which is, you know, supporting your communities. But of course, there's very big differences, isn't there, amongst your communities and the needs of your communities. So now, without further ado, we're going to ask you the first question in this panel discussion. And we're going to start with Sue. So Sue, who are your community? Who are the South Asian community? Tell us a little bit about the South Asian community in Australia and the strengths of your community. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. The South Asian community that we serve basically are people from Indian, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Bangladeshi, Nepali ancestry. So it's basically the Indian subcontinent that we're looking at. And what their strengths are is, of course, that they've been here for a little while, but not as much as maybe the Greeks and the Italians who came, as you said, post-war. But what is happening is that we are actually increasing in numbers. And also, there are lots of parents who have migrated, people who have migrated in the older age. So the aged care for that group is now becoming quite an essential activity. So we have been working with Multicultural New South Wales Department of Social Services, Parramatta Council, Hornsby Council to identify issues and areas of concern for the South Asian community. Things like domestic and family violence, elder abuse, mental health stigma, aged care, of course, how to navigate the aged care and how to access, but more importantly is how to make it suitable, culturally appropriate for that community. And we also, have done 2 research projects with UTS and Macquarie University to highlight the need for culturally appropriate aged care for the growing South Asian community. And I would encourage everyone to please do review those documents.
Thank you so much, Sue, for that overview. And I have read your report, which is a very, very high-level overview of the needs of the South Asian community in Australia. And so I encourage you all to read that report. Not sure how you're going to get access. Is it on the CEVA International website?
Yes, actually, I did provide the access to the panel. And if you can share it with the stakeholders, our website is currently being upgraded to allow for it to go on that. But I can forward you the links. It's on the UTS website. So you can actually go to the Shopfront UTS website, their library. The report is available there.
Thank you so much, Sue. And maybe one thing that you think are the strengths of your communities and the people that you've come across, what are some of the strengths that you've noticed?
I think our main strength of our community is the fact, like people who are, we have this family setting where we do support our aged care people, people who are in the aged care range. We live with our parents, we support our parents, and really accessing aged care is a last resort when everything else we have tried has failed. And now we have no other choice but to either put them into residential care or start seeking for home care support because people are working, they have young children, they have other duties. But we are still a pretty strong knit community, and we do like to support each other a lot. But, of course, like I said, there comes a time for everyone when we do need to have greater care outside from the home participants.
Yes, that's a really good point. So, of course, that community support and the fact that you've noticed that people can support each other, but then there's additional needs. Thanks, Sue. Next, we have Marlon De Leon, of course, the president of the Filipino Community Council of Victoria. So, who are the Filipino community, Marlon? And of course, what are their strengths that you think?
Good morning, Lisa. And as you know, the Filipino community is very cheerful and always smiling, even in times of adversity. Well, the Filipino Community Council of Victoria is the peak body of Filipino Australian communities in Victoria. And as you know, obviously, we are supporting the Filipino Australian community here. Who are the Filipinos? So obviously, we're from the Philippines, but on its own, if you don't know it, the Philippines is composed of over 1,600 islands. And each island has different differences and, uniqueness of its own. And the diversity, just within the Philippines alone, we have obviously we are speaking Filipino, which is from the Tagalog local dialect, and also English as the main 2 languages. But we have over 200 sub-languages and dialects that is being spoken in so many different islands. So on our own itself, the reason why probably it's so hard to unite the Filipinos, it's because we got so many languages, but in its own as well. As it's made from those thousands of islands, the Filipino is one of the most prominent migrant in Australia. We are the 5th largest migrating community now in Australia. And I guess it can be a strength or it can be a weakness. I will tell later on with the challenges that we are facing. But we see the Filipinos, even though we are, the strength of the Filipinos may more likely be our ability to adapt and the resilience of the members of the community compared to all the other communities. I'm not bragging, but I can say we are probably born to survive any challenges, and we can easily assimilate, put the Filipinos in one group and they will speak Italian, they will speak Greek. We are born to adapt to so many languages and nationalities. And I believe our strength is our naturally born carers. We care for our families and extended families. And the Filipinos obviously is a country that export workforce in health. So there's a lot of Filipinos working in health, aged care, and allied industries. The Philippines is probably one of the biggest source of exports for health professionals and other skilled migrants. And I believe our strength is we are born to speak, I'd say, English, which is probably one of our strengths, but it's more of the American English. And in its own uniqueness, the Filipino is not just Filipino. We are Spanish by descent, we are American by descent, we are Japanese by descent, because those three countries have colonized the Philippines for over a combination of 350 years.
Wonderful. Wow, Marlon, thank you so much. There's a few things that I didn't know about, the over 8,000 islands, and of course, all the diversity of the Filipino community. I mean, you could be the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, couldn't you, Marlon? I mean, you know, with all the the experience that you've had, that you know, keep believing, and of course,
yeah, I haven't mentioned that we are one of the ethnos, the uniquely one of the states with we have the Filipino communities of Australia. We're a member of that. And it's only Victoria who have this ethno-specific home care and also a provider of CHSP. All other states, all other Filipino peak bodies in all other states, in other states doesn't have the services that we offer. So we are the envy of the other Filipino communities in Australia.
Yes, I understand. So your Victorian sort of leaders are sort of mentoring and supporting other states and territory with people living in those communities. Wow, Marlon, thank you so much. And it's made me reflect upon the fact that when we think about a country like the Philippines or India or South America, you know, it's not just one category, is that we've got different faiths, different languages, and different ways of life. So thank you so much, Marlon. And now we're over to Luis Sanchez, again, the president of the Latin American Community of Australia. So Luis, over to you. What are we talking about when we talk about Latin American communities in Australia? And what are some of the strengths you've noticed, besides the beautiful dancing, the salsa dancing? Sorry, I had to say that because let's be honest, there's a lot of dancing there, isn't there?
I was going to start by saying that, but no, I can't.
Sorry to, you know, to sort of kind of, you know, define you in that way as dance, but I can't help but think about dancing when I think about South America. So
yeah, and I did want to start with that because generally that's what people know about us and what we are known for, and we're happy about that. We embrace it, and we actually want to share it with the community. I wanted to clarify that LACA Queensland, Latin American Community of Australia, is Queensland, because our work and my work has been mainly focused in Queensland. As a community, my understanding is we haven't organized ourselves enough to have a national body yet. There has been an expectation around that, but one of the challenges of having such a diverse and culturally and linguistically diverse community is to get people to work together, and that's something. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, you know that we're happy, we love having a good time, we love dancing, but it's good for you to know other things so that we can actually have active participation in Australian society, and that's in a way similar to what Marlon was saying. When you talk about Latin Americans, you're talking about over 30 countries. We generally associate Latin America with the Spanish, but Spanish and Portuguese are widely I mean, a lot of people, I mean, the two main languages are Spanish and Portuguese. So sometimes Portuguese are a little bit put aside, but not, because it's a population, a significant number of the population speak that language. And under those two big languages, there are many traditional languages within each country. So that in itself is already a challenge. Apart from the number of countries, there's of course a wide variety in terms of social and political and economic circumstances of all these countries. And that is relevant because that has, in a way, delineated the migration to Australia. So there was a significant migration in the 70s, but it was of a particular countries. So Argentina, Chile, were the largest populations coming at the time. But if you look more recently, you will see that Colombia and Brazil are countries that are more common, and that those would be more like the emerging community. But at the same time, those that came in the 70s are the ones that are having the challenges associated to aged care right now, and that's something that needs to be considered if we want to address the needs of those particular people. We need to have some understanding around those issues. Of course, that also influenced the skills. So many people, the first migrants, many of them came in a forced way. They just were running away of political circumstances, of war. They just have to run away. So the people that came were all sort of, I mean, in a way, they were not thinking about here, or didn't have a plan to come here. The set of skills maybe in cases were just limited. They don't have any language other than their own. So when they came here, they really struggled to adapt. Whereas when you see the more recent communities, are people that many of them are already bilingual. Most of them already have some knowledge of English, and they come to further their studies. They already have some studies. So again, the challenges between the first ones and the second ones are completely different. And that reflects in what you start to see in the needs of those who are reaching aged care.
Yes.
And finally, just wanted to mention that, sometimes we think it's, Latin Americans are around, but we sometimes disregard the number. We are also a significant number. According to the census in 2016, we are over 130,000 people in Australia. Here in Queensland, we are over around 30,000. And that's just only considering those that report being born in South America or in Latin America, and which means the number is significantly larger. Yet in many services, in many government agencies, we are a very small minority, and therefore not a priority when providing a specific service for our community.
Thank you.
In terms of the strengths, I believe, as you mentioned, this happiness and this warmth that we have, but also that people feel, help us adjust and get together with people. But at the same time, all these skills and all the knowledge and the experience of the ones that arrived earlier, but also the knowledge and skills that those are coming, if we are able to put all this together, we are a very strong community. We just need to learn to work together.
Yeah. Very good reflections there, Lewis. And of course, we're talking about a whole continent, are we? I mean, not just a country, let's be honest. I mean, it's so complex. And like you said, so many countries involved and so many different needs. And to unify, that is very quite complex. But of course, it's really good to hear your insights into that. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to pass it over to Nikki, who's going to ask the second question. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks very much, Lisa, and they were really great responses. It shows, the ways of migration we have been having within different communities, but also diversity within diversity, which is very exciting and amazing. And I maybe we'll go to the second question out of the three questions. And I'm going to start with Sue first. And this is around, what does your community need to access the aged care system? Obviously, you were mentioning before the UTS study that you work together with the University of Technology Sydney. So what would you like to add to that?
What I'd like to add is that the Indian subcontinent community is still very small in the overall terms. According to the census, it's about 700,000 people all around Australia. But the important part, of course, is the fact that the sample that we did as part of the UTS study was a very small sample between Blacktown, Parramatta, Cumberland region. And it found that there are 115 service providers. 38 of them were cultural specific, mainly to the Jewish, Chinese, and Polish communities, and only 2 provided cultural appropriate care to the South Asian communities. One was a respite center and one was a residential. And a population in that area, that South Asian population is 14% of the total population, is pretty poor, that there are only 2 facilities that cater to the South Asian community. So I think the first thing that we really need is availability. We need availability of care, for the people. And the second thing, of course, is availability of appropriate care, culturally appropriate. When we say culturally appropriate, we're talking about food that is nutritious, diverse, understanding the needs for vegetarian, non-vegetarian, halal, non-halal, wellness activities, mental health practices, understanding the different type of activities that different communities require, the nuances, the emotional drivers, proximity. It's no point having one facility that is far away from their families. So we really need to have this available in all the facilities where we do have South Asian people accessing the services. And we need to have leisure that they understand and appreciate culturally diverse, access to scripture, guidance, places of worship, bilingual staff and signage. I can't emphasize that enough, because this is very, very important, particularly in the area of health literacy and comprehension, because unless the doctors and the medical staff are able to communicate properly and tell people what medications they need to take, when they have to take, what are the side effects, there's a huge thing as far as health literacy, understanding, communicating. I think language, signage is very, very important. Also, another area is end-of-life care and support. Because once you go into residential, very often people are heading towards palliative. And therefore, the understanding of what is the Hindu religion needs, what are the different religion needs, how do you approach it, how do you support the people in the religious and spiritual care. So there is a huge lack of understanding about what is actually required. If we look at the aged care diversity framework and the aged care quality standards, it mandates a framework for inclusion of the CALD community requirements, but there's no funding mechanism to encourage service providers to meet them. There is no audit to see whether they have processes in place. Are they actually doing anything? Are they training their staff? Is it a cultural appropriate training that's provided? The research that we did with Macquarie University was a very small sample, but it did come up with the fact that people are not getting the training. They are not getting the training. So the profits are taking precedence over quality. And so I think it's really, really important that, like I said, availability first, to have access to facilities, home care services, which are culturally appropriate, people who speak the language, who understand their needs. But more importantly also is the training of the staff, and in the specific needs. So a long way to go, very long way to go for us.
Thank you, Sue, for sharing your amazing insights. And, we can see you've done already a lot of research and, thought about what's really a priority for your community. And you were saying to us before, when we had the meeting before, for you, it's really also about, that the whole of the aged care system is more, what you were mentioning, more inclusive to the South Asian communities, because you couldn't build ethno-specific facilities in each area, because your community is really spread around the country in different local government areas. So really appreciate your insight and sharing it. But I think a lot of people in the audience will probably can relate to it, maybe who have worked with your communities, and there will be sure there's more follow-up to do. Now maybe I go. Oh, sorry. Yes, Sue?
I might just add to that is that yes, we definitely don't see the need from going from 2 facilities to 4. That doesn't meet the requirements. We really do want it to become a wider movement in the aged care facilities, where people do understand the cultural needs of the people that they serve, whether it's residential or home care, that once they understand who their clients are, that they try to understand their cultural needs and train their staff accordingly. That way we will reach a larger group of people who need to access these services.
Thanks very much. And obviously the PCAC program across Australia plays a very important role in training aged care providers to be more inclusive. And I now go to Louise and ask you, what's your community need to access the aged care system?
Well, I thought it was important to remark before anything else that I think we all agree that there are concerns about the aged care system in general as a whole. There are problems with access. There are problems with quality and safety standards for everyone. And until those are addressed, the issues for everyone are not being addressed. And that includes people or communities like cultural and linguistically diverse communities. So my point is, in societies or in systems, those who suffer the most are the minorities. And if the system is already failing somehow in some areas, those minorities are going to suffer even more. So unless the system starts to address those problems that as a whole is having, we will continue to have issues. Then it comes to, okay, what do we need specifically, or what are the specific challenges of culturally and linguistically diverse communities and the Latin American community? Well, I believe similar to most of CAL communities is we need more education. But we need more education about what the system is, what the system can offer. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that we are not educated, which is often a problem in the communication between the system and the organizations around this. There is sort of an assumption that you're a migrant and you don't have a skill, or you don't have knowledge, or you don't have understanding. We don't know the system because many of the countries that we come from don't even have an aged care system. So we don't have any expectation about this. So the first thing is that we need to learn about it. Otherwise, why would we seek support from a type of service like this one? And then even if we seek that support, well, we don't know what's on offer. We don't understand how it works. So it needs, in that sense, it needs more education. But that brings to another topic, how that education is delivered, because that's what Sue was mentioning. It has to be culturally appropriate. Otherwise, the message doesn't come across. If it's not delivered in a way that that particular community or those particular communities understand or make sense of it, well, the message is not, it's not going to come across, as I said. And that highlights the responsibility that providers have to do that, because often who's to blame? Again, the people from CAL communities are the ones to blame because they don't know anything, or because they don't have the language, or because they don't have the skills. No, we need to, as a system and as organizations, we need to start take responsibility that we have to deliver those messages in a way that they reach the people that they need to reach, and that they understand that message. Until the organizations and the system and the government understand that they have a responsibility in doing that, no big change is going to happen. And then finally, I guess the other comment is, well, we need people on the ground. We need to go and meet the people. We need to talk to them directly. We need to bring them in and have them in the conversation, sit with them on the table and listen to them. And yes, that needs the workers from within the community are part of the system, yes. But not just any worker, because not just because the fact that you speak the language or you come from that country, it doesn't mean you understand what the people need or what's the best way of delivering the support or care. There's need to be training around that, which is, I believe, what Sue also was raising. There needs to be more understanding of what culturally appropriate services are, what culturally appropriate services imply, and that has to be done with the community and people and workers within the community.
Thanks very much, Luis. Really, it's about, I think, what you were saying about advocating for communities, you know, and empowering communities. I really appreciate that. I think it was very insightful for all of us to, you know, get these sort of grassroots information from the local level, and we are from 3 different states, but we find there's also, you know, overlapping issues. I just want to remind everyone, we have to be mindful. We need to finish at 12:30, so we need to sort of stick to time. So I'm asking Marlon the question as well, if you could be like short now, because we need to sort of be aware of that. So what does your community need to access the aged care system? Go ahead, Marlon.
All right. So as provider of home care and CHSP, I've seen over the years that they still need a lot of education in regards to accessing services like my aged care. The community is aging. Obviously, the first generation migrants here from the 60s and 70s are now transitioning from senior citizens to home care consumers at the moment. And as you see, the Filipino community is so huge on its own that you cannot identify a facility that is a Filipino associated facility. That's the one of our biggest aspirations. However, we still see a lot of Filipinos dying at home, waiting for home care package. There's still people that has been assessed for years that hasn't been accepted to the system. So they still need a really great improvement of making sure that what we expect from the home care package through to the facility care is delivered in time for us, for these elderly people that we respect, because they're the ones who built Australia. They are part of those who we owe this community about. And most of them, if not all of them, will probably be experiencing some degree of waiting for to be able to get those home care packages into their hands. And also, when you say educating, it's also about educating the family of these elderly, the family of the elderly Filipino Australians, because at some stage, because of our extended family nature, so we used to care for families, even second, third generation, in that, to the point that when the parents or grandparents need the care, it's probably be too late before they pass it on to the system. But lucky we have our CHSP program where we can put them in there while waiting for home care packages, but we can only do much. Our services is a legacy service that we inherited through the years. However, that contract with CHSP hasn't grown for years as well, but the number of Filipinos has grown up so much in Victoria alone. We identified between 8,000 to 9,000 Filipinos needing CHSP and HCP later on. But we only have how many hours allocation for CHSP. So there's a mismatch for the services we need and the services that we are funded to deliver. So that's probably it.
Thanks very much, Marlon. Really appreciate that, sharing your insights and what you were talking about. I think it's really important that communities have built this country, and that's important for us to remember. I just want to remind everyone, when you're not speaking and if there's background noise, can you please put yourself on mute? Marlon, I think there's a bit of background noise there. And I hand it now back over to Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for that, and also, just really important key points to note about the key issues facing the diverse communities that we're talking about today. Of course, we have the home care waiting lists, how to access aged care. These have been spoken about before on a national level, even a state-based level. I know from a Victorian perspective in the Victorian Parliamentary Inquiry into the needs of older people from migrant backgrounds, that these are very chronic issues, culturally appropriate care, just to name a few, and navigators. That whole idea that Lewis was talking about was listening to people, visiting people, assertive outreach, and so we need more hand-holding in some cases to really help people journey and navigate the aged care system. Now, our final question. So we're on time. We've got 10 minutes to go. So now it's about dreaming. And so if you were to have, if your communities were to, you feel like, what would need to happen for your communities to be safe and happy in the aged care system? And what's your vision for that? So what would it look like for your communities to feel safe, happy, and have dignity within the aged care system? So maybe this time we'll start with Marlon.
Well, like I said, we are a big community, but we don't have any aged care facility yet associated to the Filipino community. I'm dreaming of having an aged care facility that is designed to the most beautiful resort in the Philippines, Boracay. And I'm dreaming that all the staff are trained to respond the specific need of elderly Filipinos, and the training and the food and everything is designed to accommodate the need of an aging Filipino. And obviously we wish to promote the culture, not only as they age, they also have to go, they're going to go back to what they grown for, and then make them feel that we brought in a slice of the Philippines here in Australia.
And that would be, and it sounds amazing, Marlon. And, I think that, we can sort of continue to advocate and raise the voice of the Filipino communities of Australia, and to sort of, we know that there's other models of care where there's community-led residential care facilities, and, where people feel their culture is reflected in the aged care system. So it's definitely achievable. So hopefully we'll see how it all pans out, and hopefully we can support the process. What about you, Sue? What would your vision be in supporting dignity and care for the South Asian community, older people in South Asian communities of Australia?
Thank you. I think the small number of people that we have so far will take a long time before we can have one facility that will cater for the entire South Asian, residents. But what my vision is, as I mentioned earlier, people don't think about aged care until it sort of falls upon them. People are very happy to provide home care, for their loved ones, but it comes to a point when they cannot manage anymore. So what happens then is this total bewilderment as to what to do, where to go, where to turn, how do we get access, and then come the waiting times after that. So I think my vision is of educating the community as much as we can about what is available, how they can access it, is easily navigated, and also one that meets the needs of the culturally appropriate needs of the residents. Because the most important thing to remember is that when people are removed from their home, there is this feeling of separation, and there's a feeling of abandonment. And the worst thing we can do is to give a vegetarian person food saying this is vegetarian, it's only just boiled potatoes and vegetables, without understanding what vegetarian means. And what happens then is that the people who are there are not comfortable, they are not happy, and they actually go down in their quality of life so much that the families actually have to end up supporting them again anyway, bringing them food every day, making sure that they are eating well. So I think it is really very important, like I said, for both sides. One is educating the community on what is available, how they can access it, and to be prepared and to be ready in their mind as to when they might require this help. But more importantly then, for the facilities, the aged care providers, to understand the needs of the people, to understand what it means to be ready to provide if they have, it's always hard to think that if you have only one or two people in your aged care facility that you're going to cater for them. But I think you still need to do that. You still need to do that. And you also, things like Meals on Wheels, when they're providing food, understanding the specific cultural needs is really, really important. And I'm certainly hoping that, like I said, yes, it would be wonderful to have one facility to cater for South Asian community, but it's not going to meet the requirements. So we really need a more broader recognition of what is required.
Yes, Thank you so much, Sue. And that, I guess that sort of
Thank
gives a broad overview of your vision for a culturally appropriate aged care system, isn't it? Whether, you know,
Yes.
there's someone from a South Asian background, sorry to group it all into one term, so for example, Indian background, who's in a residential care facility and is the only resident in that facility, that their rights are still the same if they're in,
Still the same.
you know, in a group where everyone speaks the same language or has the same cultural background. So, you know, it's still about that they have the right to culturally appropriate care, that they have the right to food diversity. And, you know, because food does link to identity, culture and well-being and mental health. And so, you know, we think, oh, you know, it's just food. No, it's a big thing around, you know, how people connect with food and memory, and also the rituals around food. So, you know, how did people eat? How, did they go around their table? Did they share food with their families? What utensils did they use? What kind of things and rituals happen around there? So the dinner table, for example, or wherever it might be. So I really, really support your dreams, Sue, and of course at the Centre for Cultural Diversity and Ageing and the PCAC Alliance, that's what we're talking about. So let's continue the struggle. Thanks, Sue. And now finally, thank you. If only we've got 2 minutes left, Lewis, and we can go a little bit over time, but what would your vision be for the Latin American communities of Australia in accessing the aged care system? What would that look like? And of course, if there are some things that Sue or Marlon's mentioned already, because it's interesting to see that some of the themes overlapping. So over to you, Lewis.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what they say. And adding to that, I would just say that I would envision a system that is responsive to the needs. But to be responsive, you need to be willing to try new things, to implement new ways of doing things. And yeah, one option is having specialized services, but other options are working in partnerships, in different ways of partnership. And that has been our experience in our organization. One of the main goals of the organization when it started was to get a special place for our elders. In the process of seeking this, we gradually transformed. We still dream with that, but the thing is, in the process to achieve something, we engage with the Dutch community, which already has an aged care facility, and started working together. And now they have and deliver some service for our community that is culturally appropriate, even though it's within a facility that started by the Dutch community. So I guess the message is every community is different, and you might reach a different outcome, a different way of doing it. But we need to explore other ways. There are other ways of doing things, and if the system is open to that, we will reach and we will achieve a better system, and we will care better for our people.
That's fantastic, Lewis, and I can see the care that's in your voice as well. That you care for the rights of people, and that we can learn from each other. So, you know, for the Dutch community, or from the Indian community, or from the Filipino communities, or the Muslim communities, or the Jewish communities, or the Sikh communities, or whoever it might be, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, that we all have these kind of overarching themes, and we can support each other. So thank you so much, Lewis. Well, that concludes our session around new and emerging communities. And now over to Nikki to give you some further information about where to get some further support.
Yes, I just want to mention that we are all of the we are part of the PCAC Alliance, which you can access at pcagalliance.org, and we really value all the input that we received today from different states, from the different PCAC members. So please stay in touch with the PCAC Alliance, and really an amazing session. And I think the point about partnership is really important in a time where we have a lot of competition, to rethink about what Louis said about how we can partner with each other. And now going back to Lisa to close today's session, and it was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and thanks again to all the panelists, of course, Lewis, Sue and Marlon, for your amazing work and your contributions in the aged care sector and health sector and human rights sector. We look forward to continuing the conversations. Stay tuned, audience, for another session on the needs of new and emerging communities at 4 p.m. this afternoon, another 45-minute discussion with members from the Indian Cultural Society, as well as the Afghan community, and of course the Bhutanese community. So looking forward to continuing the conversations. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely lunch, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you, hosts. Nikki, Lisa, forward promoting their next session. They're turning very professional. Wonderful to get those perspectives. It's true. Lunch is with us. Lunch concludes at 1:10 1:10 back here, and we start right on time. And afterwards, we're going to talk about changes to the Commonwealth Home Support Program, marketing to elder-called communities, how to access the translation and language services and interpretation services. We're going to meet some more new communities, as you know, and more. But just before we break for lunch, I have the shortest of short surveys for you that we're going to pop up on the screen because we want to know a little bit more about you, which is not my preference. I'd rather just talk about me for a little bit longer, but I think we're going to throw up a poll and get you to tell us a little bit about yourself because we're interested, and so too, of course, are the powers that be. And also during lunch, you're going to have a little cinematic experience. We're going to show you some beautiful videos that have been shot, which may be a lovely way to pass the time as you enjoy your lunch, which is your responsibility, by the way. There's not going to be any knock on the door with a hot lunch delivered to you courtesy of the conference. It's an online conference only. So if I can get that poll put up, that would be lovely. Or do I need to do something clever? Let's have a click. There it is. There's the live poll, and I hope you can all see it. Short, simple. Oh, I'm watching the results change. I feel like I'm Anthony Green. We went from 100% home care to 14% residential care now in the lead. CHSP bringing up the rear at 21%, and out in the background, educational institutions at just 6%. I think these questions are pretty simple. Everything's a horse race these days, whether it be politics or a quick 3-question survey at a conference. Does your organisation provide aged care services to rural and remote communities? 50 split precisely. Goodness me, that's remarkable. I might share these results so you also know who you're conferencing with. And by the way, you know, talking about the PICAC Alliance, Norman Swan, Dr. Norman Swan, no less, talked about strong representation to government. Well, the PICAC Alliance helps us do that. So I think you can see the results of that 3-part survey. There's a little more, but that's after lunch. So folks, relax, take some deep breaths, stretch it out, answer some emails and texts and phone calls and Facebook messages and tweets and Instagrams and TikToks. We'll see you back here 1:10 sharp for the afternoon session. Farewell.